convention on Thursday that Biden couldn't survive this because just like Richard Nixon in 1974, when his allies in the Senate on the Republican side came up to the White House and said, Mr. President, we have no choice. We are going to vote to convict you. You will be impeached. You will be convicted. You need to step aside. That was the moment that convinced Nixon that he had to go. He had no choice. And I think Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama going to Biden gave him no choice. The last 2 days was all about negotiating the severance. Okay, we've agreed to go. What are you going to give us in exchange?
It's 1:33 News Talk 1130 WISN. You heard Dan O'Donnell and Dave Michaels. Jerry Bott is here to recap. A little over 1/2 hour ago, President Joe Biden announced he is dropping out of the campaign, will not run for re-election, but will stay as president through the end of his first term. The president has endorsed Kamala Harris. Dan, Jerry, and I, and you might be joined by other WISN hosts here momentarily, are sharing our initial reaction. If the debate never happened, Dan, and we know why it did, but let's say for conversation's sake, that debate back in June 27th, I believe, never took place. We're not here today, are we?
Absolutely not. Without question, the debate was the catalyst because eventually, I believe, Democrats realized at some point, probably over the last 6 months, that there would come a point where Biden's decline would become so obvious and so apparent that the media could never, ever again credibly claim, well, these are cheap fakes, and don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe the reality that your own senses present you. Instead, accept the reality that we present you. Ultimately, I think they thought even their dramatic advantage in terms of control of the media wouldn't be enough. People would know that this man is clearly not capable of either running for president or serving as president, and that he would have to go. This is why I think in hindsight, there was no doubt that there was going to be a change if Biden didn't absolutely wipe the floor with Trump in June. And this is why that debate was set for June 27th. Nothing else about it makes sense unless you accept that the debate was set at that early date in order to provide that test for Biden. Now, in hindsight, was it in fact a mistake for Trump to accept the debate that early? Remember, Trump had been saying, did Democrats in effect goad Trump into doing something that was probably the worst thing politically for him? Now, his poll numbers have indeed taken off since that debate. And of course, nobody could have predicted the ultimate black swan event in this election cycle, Trump's attempted assassination. But would this have been a different story? Would Donald Trump absolutely storm to re-election if the first debate was held, say, in mid-September, and it became beyond apparent that Biden was this senile? Now, Democrats wouldn't have had a chance. They wouldn't have had a choice. They would have had to just suck it up. I still do believe, Dave, that Democrats understand the trajectory of this race. Now, will they still be doing everything they can with ballot drop boxes and mail-in voting and trying to, as I call it, the Ernie von Schledorn model of voting, push, pull, and drag every single breathing human being to the polls, and if they need to vote for them, sure, they're going to pull out all the stops. They're going to pull out all the stops, of course, in order to get as many votes out there. But I still believe they see the trajectory of this race, and this is all about trying to preserve majorities in the Senate and trying to limit the damage in the House. We are now joined live on the phone by News Talk 1130 WISN's Jay Weber. Jay, your immediate reaction to the news?
Well, I guess not terribly surprising. They were doing all sorts of horse trading behind the scenes, and I don't know if it ultimately became a number for the Bidens or if it became certain promises they would get, but shocking in that it's unprecedented, and also not shocking that this is the way the sabers of our democracy are going to handle things when their guy isn't guaranteed to win.
Doesn't that speak volumes about the just utter fakeness and transparently cynical nature of them calling Trump a threat to democracy? They just disenfranchised every single one of their primary voters, and now what, 3,000 party elites are going to decide for them, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. If you believe the polls, at least 2/3 and up to 3/4 of Democrat voters didn't want Joe Biden to hang in this race. So maybe they aren't disenfranchising as many people as the Biden team would like us to think. But yeah, I mean, they absolutely are throwing out the entire process, the entire democratic process, and deciding that their party is going to make this decision in a back room.
Does this make it more difficult for Trump to recapture the White House? We are hearing now that Biden has endorsed Kamala Harris, that Democrats are going to at least try to rally the party around the vice president. Do you think it'll be more difficult for Trump to beat her, or given the fact that the polls have been pretty consistent, Trump beats Harris by roughly the same amount in both the swing states and nationally as he beats Biden, do you think it's pretty much a wash here?
Well, I think it's pretty much watched. I think it'll be a little bit harder because she's a woman, she's younger, she's African-American. At the same time, if they would have gone off the board with someone completely new, that person could have said, look, Joe Biden's failures are not on me. Kamala Harris has got to own every Joe Biden failure policy-wise, and she also has to answer the question, if she clearly knew he was in a dementia state and helped cover it up. So she's going to be complicit in the cover-up. She's going to be made to own all of his policies. There's just no way that they can separate Kamala Harris out as someone completely new and fresh and different. She still owns all that baggage and drags all of that into a race that is now, I mean, we're 90 days away maybe from Election Day. We're 40 days away from the earliest voting, something like that.
Yeah, just when the September 16th is when early voting starts in Pennsylvania. That's the earliest state.
Yeah. So that's how I see it. I think she owns all of this.
Let me ask you a question, Jay. Do you think this thing is orchestrated to the point Democrats, if nothing else, they're very good at taking orders and following the leader? Do you think that this whole thing has been orchestrated to the point where there will be little to no dissension with regard to Kamala Harris being anointed as the nominee, or is there going to still be some infighting? Are we going to see some stuff over the next 4 weeks leading into the DNC in Chicago that might suggest that maybe they're not all that unified? There's so many little factions, and it's such a fractured sort of coalition that the Democrats have cobbled together. I can't believe that everybody's just going to bless Kamala Harris and say, oh boy, this is great, and just move on. Or am I wrong about that?
No, I think there's going to be both. You have the insiders club that is Pelosi, Obama, Schumer, and all the insiders, and that will include the DNC delegates that are elected and a large chunk of this party. So I think the vast majority are, yes, they're going to come up with a scenario, they're going to orchestrate it, and they're just going to follow it. And then all of the stragglers and all the naysayers are just going to carp and complain, but it's a fait accompli. It's going to be happening anyway around them.
Would any of them like to explain how this differs from the calls to decertify the 2020 presidential election and essentially nullify the votes of 330 million Americans? Because how many million people went to cast their votes for Joe Biden? And Jay, remember when Dean Phillips, the Minnesota congressman, was launching this third party, or rather this insurgent campaign against Biden in the primary? He wasn't originally supposed to be the candidate. He was trying to get a bigger name to challenge him. Democrats immediately shut it down. When there would have been a chance for Democrats, and remember in 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson faced a primary challenge, and after I believe it was the New Hampshire primary, said, look, it's abundantly